Between 2015 and 2017, a company most people in the West had never heard of went on one of the most aggressive shopping sprees in the history of global business. It bought a giant stake in Hilton, the hotel empire. It bought into airports, aircraft leasing firms, technology distributors, and real estate on multiple continents. And then it did something that made the financial world sit up. It quietly became the single largest shareholder in Deutsche Bank, one of the most important financial institutions in Europe. In just a few years, this company spent tens of billions of dollars buying a piece of seemingly everything. There was only one problem: almost none of the money was its own. The company was called HNA Group, and the entire glittering empire it assembled was built on a mountain of borrowed money so enormous, around $90 billion, that it became one of the most indebted companies on the planet. When that mountain finally grew too heavy to hold, HNA didn't just stumble. It was seized by the state, forced into bankruptcy, and broken apart, and its founders were taken away. This is the story of how far you can ride on borrowed money, and what happens when the lender and the government decide they want it back. HNA's beginnings were humble. It started in the early 1990s as Hainan Airlines, a single regional carrier on a tropical island in southern China. It was led by two men, Chen Feng and Wang Jian, who turned that small airline into the seed of something vast. Over the following decades, it grew into HNA Group, a sprawling conglomerate with interests in aviation, tourism, hotels, real estate, and finance. But it was in the mid-2000s that HNA truly exploded, and it exploded outward into the world. It was an era when Chinese companies were being encouraged to go global, and money was cheap and plentiful. HNA seized the moment with both hands. It went on a buying binge unlike almost anything before it, spending, by some counts, more than $40 billion in just a couple of years. The Hilton stake, the Deutsche Bank stake, aircraft leasing, airport services, a technology distributor for $6 billion, trophy real estate. It even moved into the orbit of American politics, striking a deal with a firm run by a man about to join the incoming U.S. administration, a deal regulators ultimately blocked. For a brief moment, HNA looked unstoppable. A regional airline had become a global titan, but underneath the glamour, two things were deeply wrong. The first was the debt. Every one of those dazzling acquisitions had been bought largely with borrowed money. HNA wasn't spending a fortune it had earned, it was spending a fortune it owed. By 2017, that debt had swelled to around $90 billion. The second was the mystery. HNA's ownership was famously, deliberately murky. Large portions of the company were held by opaque charitable foundations, with executives and their relatives holding stakes through tangled layers of companies. It was so unclear who actually owned and controlled HNA that some Wall Street banks refused to do business with it at all. And in 2017, the most important audience of all decided it had seen enough: the Chinese state. Beijing had grown alarmed at a small group of conglomerates, HNA among them, that had borrowed colossal sums to buy up foreign assets. Regulators came to see these companies as what some called gray rhinos. Obvious, lumbering dangers that everyone could see coming, capable of destabilizing the country's entire financial system. The order came down. Stop buying, start selling, refocus on your core business. And just like that, HNA's spree slammed into reverse. The buying binge became a fire sale as it scrambled to offload the very trophies it had so recently celebrated. Then, in the summer of 2018, at the height of the crisis, came a strange and sudden blow. Co-founder Wang Jian died in a fall while on a trip to France. The police ruled it an accident. He was 57. His death threw the company's future and its murky ownership into even deeper uncertainty. From there, the decline accelerated. When the pandemic struck in 2020, it devastated HNA's airlines, the heart of the business. And in early 2021, the end arrived. Creditors pushed HNA into bankruptcy reorganization. The state stepped in to manage the wreckage. The stakes held by the foundations and executives were wiped out. HNA's chairman, Chen Feng, the man who had built it from a single island airline, was taken into custody by the authorities, along with the company's chief executive. The empire was carved up, its prized airline handed to new owners, and HNA, as it had existed, was gone. Here is what makes HNA different from the frauds in this series. There was no secret bank, no cooked books, no fictional profits. HNA's downfall was something simpler, and in a way, more modern. It was the danger of growth itself. HNA believed it could buy its way to greatness with limitless cheap debt, that the borrowing would never have to stop, and the bill would never quite come due. For a few intoxicating years, it looked like it was right. And then the money got expensive, the state turned hostile, and the entire structure folded under its own weight. It is a parable of an entire era of debt-fueled ambition, and it carries a lesson the others share from a different angle. An empire built on money that was never really yours can vanish the instant the people you owe decide they want it back. There's one more thing worth noting. The men who ran the frauds in the West could flee to London and fight extradition for a decade. In China, when the state decides your empire has become a risk, there is nowhere to run at all. HNA borrowed too much real money. The next man borrowed billions that were never real to begin with. He conjured them out of nothing. Fake guarantees issued again and again from a single branch of one Indian bank, while living a life of pure dazzle as the jeweler who draped Hollywood and Bollywood stars in diamonds. And he slipped quietly out of the country just before the largest bank fraud in his nation's history exploded into the open. That story is next.